Why do you believe in space weed?
It's definitely I have a layered response to that. And I say that because, looking at it from a consumer standpoint and someone who just loves the plant, loves to consume product, this product, in my opinion, is just, it's different than anything else you've seen out there. I mean, the second you look at the flower, you notice the vibrant green color. It looks like it came straight off of the plant. And just from the sizing of it alone, when you're comparing it to the traditional hang dry, so like visual, you immediately notice a difference. But then, I like to think of it in a ritualistic way. When I get some new flower, like I'm breaking it down, I'm looking at the bag appeal, right? I'm seeing how it rolls, I'm smoking it. And as I get to that next part in the process, right, breaks down real nice and easy to roll up. But then the smoking experience, honestly, for me was like a huge selling point. Like it's noticeably smooth, like butter, almost
Very
like velvet in your mouth. And as someone who's trying to even just be more conscious in terms of my own consumption, I look for that type of experience. It's, no one wants harshness. No one wants that burning feeling. And even on like really well traditional hang dry and cured flower, that's tough to achieve. And some of the best stuff I've smoked that's gone through a hang dry personally didn't compare to, space weed. That smoothness factor is just, I haven't seen it anywhere else.
Yeah, it's very apparent. I mean, especially when I always say smoke it 5 times in a row and then go back and or 10 times in a row over the course of 2, 3, 4 days, and you will start to miss space weed because the smoothness alone will be there. I think one thing I've noticed with some of the different testing that we've done, like once you do our process within 1 day, it hits that perfect pungent smell that a hang dry would take 18 days to get to. What do you think some of the benefits are for like the cultivator?
Honestly, they're immense from a cultivation standpoint. Starting with, even if you're looking at your typical cycle for perpetual harvest, you're cutting out time that you would have to consider on a traditional hang dry. In addition to that, you're looking at an easier trim process, so you're lowering your costs on a labor standpoint there. And I think in addition to that, you're in a unique position, especially when markets go through cyclical compression, right? Particularly due to fall harvest. You can have a price arbitrage. You can be able to take your product. If you plan accordingly, you could hold on to it, keep it frozen, and then you can put it through this process. And so you're not pigeonholing yourself to being stuck into the pricing that cyclically will go down during certain times of the
harvest
season.
System, like the droughts in summer, right? Let's explain to the folks that are maybe not as knowledgeable, but but we've R&D'd this up to about a year and a half maybe, and it, not saying we sell that product, but it kept the freshness even past a year. The cleanliness is something that I always find interesting that I think people don't really think about, right? Because the process, it gets rid of all these microbes. From a legal standpoint, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think, let's combining both the legal and even the cultivation standpoint, anybody who's running a cultivation business at some point has experience, whether it's PM, whether it's some type of pest, right? A failure is inevitably going to happen. And so doing whatever you can to limit that risk is always going to be important. But, we all know that the big boogeyman out there is remediation right now. And that's how a lot of people are solving those issues. And so depending on where you go, a lot of consumers don't want that to be happening to their product, or they at least want it disclosed. And so from a product law standpoint, and even a legal liability standpoint, right, you're positioning yourself in a better way where, one, I'm not having to remediate, I'm not using any of these extra sources out there in order to make my flower passable. And by taking it through this process, you're guaranteeing, at least from a microbial, right, from a powdery mildew, from a lot of the issues you have from excessive moisture content and just poor care of a particular plant, you don't have that risk as much. And that's huge, because with plants, they're living, breathing beings, in my opinion. And frankly, doing whatever you can to protect them and to protect the end consumer and the product they're getting, that should be your focus as a cultivator.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And I think going back though to like the benefits for the cultivator, it gives you a lot of flexibility in a lot of different ways, and it helps protect you in a lot of different ways. Something that we've talked about quite a bit over the last, couple months is the importance of the right genetics. I mean, just the right genetics with anything, but especially with showcasing, space weed and the technology. We're gonna, we've got some plans of doing some pretty unique types of R&Ding, when it comes to finding the right genetics. But how important, I guess, do you think that that's going to play? And then also, what are some of the strategies, that we're looking at potentially to tackle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, genetics is always the name of the game to a certain extent, right? And
Always, yeah.
so I think, no different than, people taking a traditional approach to this market, we have to take that same thought process as far as what are we going to utilize as genetics and running through the space weed process. And so, like you said, it takes some time to figure out what's going to work the right way. And that's in part because I think that we all care about this so much, right? Because we want product. It's not, you got to hit every category, man. It's not just the smoothness. It's not just a bag appeal, right? It's how is it smoking, right? How does it smell? And is that carrying over in your smoke experience? Is there terp complexity, right? It's the dry pull. It's all those things combined. And so genetics is incredibly important. And I think us taking the time to actually do the R&D, to do the research, I think we all want to make sure anything we put out, it's something that we would all smoke. The test has to be that. And so as someone who, as a consumer who's always looking for the best product out there, but as somebody who also just really loves this plant and loves to consume great fire product, that's where a lot of my focus tends to be, honestly. And I think collectively we see that teaming up with the right people, right, who are putting in the work to grow really great product, but are sourcing unique genetics, stabilized genetics, things that we know are ultimately going to help us deliver a better product to the consumers at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think creating those, us over time, building up the data sets to understand, okay, this type of candy does well with this, with our process because it's got this and this. Yeah, those are all going to be critical, and I'm really excited to start to explore that, because at the end of the day, there are other companies that have tried to do the process of sublimation, of lyophilization, and we respect it. Eric said this, right. Eric's the one that never gave up though and continued on it, and that's why I always gotta tip my hat to him. If you want to smoke the best of the best in like pretty much its own classification when it comes to the top tier version of sublimation, that's what space weed's going to be. And it's going to have a palette. It's going to have a myriad of different flavors that we're going to be constantly testing. I was talking to Ivan from the Jungle Boys about this process a number of months ago, and he told me it's all about genetics, and I'm like, you're right. Like, we're going to go hardcore R&Ding, and we're going to also crowdsource it potentially here, which we have some of the ideas we have. But that's also the name of the game too. It's like, we've mastered the process of our flash frozen cure technology of sublimation. Now we need to go and put the other pieces in place when it comes to genetics and overall education, a number of other things. But I'm excited to just use space weed as a platform to showcase things that may have been overlooked with the traditional hang dry. Like, I think there's definitely certain genetics that don't do well with the space weed. They do better with the hang dry. I think there's also the same thing with other genetics as well. So it's gonna be fascinating to see. Why do you think there's so much hesitation or like hate? Right, they're not so much, but there's a significant amount of ignorance, I would say, more so, but hate towards this overall skew of lyophilization, sublimation in the market, in your opinion?
I think the two biggest factors would be, first, that it is a bit of human nature to be resistant to something that is different and not known. But then you couple that with the fact that there have been other people who have tried to utilize this form of technology to produce a similar product, but they've done so unsuccessfully. And so you have a market where some people have tried this, and the outcome made consumers, not necessarily buy in to this process and the product it creates. And you couple that with, not having enough education on the benefits and why we should be looking to potentially try a product like this. And you have a resistance that comes from that. But I think that's something that we're in a unique position to solve. I think, with the right education, with also the right collaborations, and using our platform to showcase the myriad of benefits that this product can have. I really do think that that's how you're going to win people over. It's not something that, we've got a little bit of repair to do. There's no doubt about that. But I think we're perfectly positioned to be that brand that does that.
Yeah, I think we are too. Absolutely. Another thing I want to ask too, what's your thoughts on like, I personally, some people say that space weed, right, like it could maybe burns too quick, or maybe it's not as like head banging, like, a head banging high. Personally, I kind of like those two things, like in terms of it being kind of a little bit quicker to smoke and a little bit lighter. Not so it still gets me high as fuck. It gets me really, really high. It almost feels like a clear high to me. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? I guess like that overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, right? In part, I think it depends on kind of the consumption method. Like when I vaporize space weed, same for me, gets me very high. And even with smoking, depending on the genetic that I've tried, there's a variable degree in how much it hits me. But I've also taken giant bong rips of space weed, and incredibly smooth, voluminous hits. I'm not there coughing, not there uncomfortable. So I would say that for me personally, I find that how I choose to consume it will have an impact on how much I will get high from it. But generally speaking, I really enjoy using the Volcano because you're getting a great experience of the terpene profile. So, getting those flavors. It's already smooth outside of being in the Volcano. And so it's even smoother. So you have this very, very smooth, easy consumption process, and you feel great, right? It is clear-headed.
Clear, like very good high, like really, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's, at the end of the day, I think that's what we're all sort of looking for, right? We want to feel good.
Yeah. There's times where I'll smoke some amazing looking flower, it's fire, but it's like I almost got a headache, like a head banging high. Like it's and it's very, I don't want to have that much resistance when I'm trying to get, I'm trying to get high to a certain degree. Sometimes there's occasions for like maybe that I do want that, but most of the time I'm not, right? Especially when I'm trying to be productive, right? I for my productivity too, when I'm smoking, I smoke space weed. Like that's helped me personally. Now that's, it could be different for everyone, but people that start to, try it out consistently, a lot of them will agree with that. Yeah. And at the end of the day, going back to what you're saying, people are just ignorant about the process, and they're just anything that they're not educated about, that they don't truly get a proper education, a proper unboxing or presentation that really showcases all of the different benefit, an education on it. They're going to resort to ignorance, negativity. Fuck that. I'm not used to that. So I don't like that. But if it's presented in the right way, to the right, in the right way to the right people, 99% of the time, people love it. Like that's what I've noticed over the years with space weed, right? If it's marketed, educated, the education's in the right way, and then it's presented in the right way, everyone, almost everyone I know jumps on the bandwagon that I've seen. It's just these people that are just, don't even want to have a conversation about it. Or it's these people that saw their friends, friend, right, or their uncle try to buy a freeze dryer and do it themselves, and they fucked it up. And they go, that shit sucks. It's like, okay, yeah, your process sucks. Your technology sucks. We figured it out. Like Eric spending, years and years and years in R&D, right? And we're continuously doing that. So this is coming. This is like, no matter what, this is a wave that's going to be coming. The sublimation, whatever it's called, right? It's going to be called the space weed era, in my opinion, or the phase. But it's coming, and it's here to stay. So I'm just excited to see how this all unfolds. This is Fabian Limon. That's how you say it.
Yeah.
Okay. He's someone I met about 6 months ago. Right?
Yeah, about
6 months ago, and through another business deal that we were both dealing with a bonehead. Let's just put it that way. In the genetic space, but that's beside the point. But I've been working with Eric for quite some time now, off and on. Like I said, the very first company I ever started with was Space Weed. And me and Eric, we've always been looking for that third component to a lean business structure that's going to be effective, which was, you know, a lot of ways, you know, obviously the legal stuff, but you know, a methodology to it to help us better organize everything and just stay on track. And so, yeah, and you fit in perfectly, because there's like folks that aren't aware, there's very few people like Fabian. He's a lawyer, a grower, a businessman, entrepreneur. He's a lot of different amazing qualities about him. And so just, you know, I believe in fate, because everything, like I never thought I would be back with Space Weed, fully invested in, ready to like, you know, take this to the next level. Honestly, like if you were to ask me a couple years, I didn't know that was going to be in the cards. But all these pieces came together, and one of the biggest ones was, you know, was you. And so I'm very excited for what we're about to build here.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate those kind words, man.
Yeah.
And you know, it's definitely, you know, like I think we say this pretty frequently to each other. I no longer believe in coincidences.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I'd been a longtime fan of everything that you were doing, just consuming your content, watching the way you move, and had known through some of my clients that you were talking to them. But I always tell myself, it's like, when the time comes, if it's meant to be, you know, Luke and I will interact. And again, shout out to Tom from Money Tree Genetics back in Illinois, because, you know, great friend, longtime client. And, you know, I think he was really the first one who was kind of interacting with you. That kind of brought me into the ecosphere that was developing there. And from there, you and I connected, and we just started talking about Space Weed. And I honestly, like, you built up so much credibility in this space. And in terms of what I was watching you do, I was like, all right, if Luke is very interested in the opportunity and he's telling me how phenomenal it is, like, I need to look into this. And I mean, I think not too long after we talked, I got in a car, I drove to Detroit, I went to go meet Eric.
Yeah. Originally we were talking about like retro tech with the genetics, right? Yeah. And then, you know, Eric reconnected with me, because, you know, me and Eric, we would talk, you know, we would check in with each other, you know, every 6 months or whatever it may be. And like, it was like, right, it was like 2 or 3 days, like after our third conversation, it was like, you're right then, Eric had hit me up. And then it was, in my mind, it became clear to me. I was like, oh shit, we had like, this might, so then I called you and I was like, yeah, this is something I've been waiting for years to have this opportunity to do. And I knew I was onto something when I knew that if he agreed with it. So I guess it kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and that was, honestly, it kind of happened quickly from there. I got out there, I met Eric. I got to see the product, got to try the product, got to get to know Eric. And, you know, it didn't take me too long to really see what you saw. And of course, you know, there was work to be done, but, you know, part of kind of wearing the lawyer hat is doing due diligence. And so it's assessing opportunities, understanding opportunity cost to engage in those, you know, those businesses. And ultimately I was able to take the time and really kind of dig under the hood, and I was impressed. You know, Eric really did a tremendous amount of hard work to get everything where it is today. And as I kind of started looking at the chessboard, if you will, and looking at the pieces that we had, I knew, I was like, okay, we can take this to the next level, because it should be there. The product speaks for itself, right? And I think that's the really cool part about it, is that, like, you take Space Weed and you put it in front of anyone, honestly, and they're shocked, right?
It actually speaks for itself. There's so many people out there that say, I just like to let the weed speak for itself. And I'm just like, dude, stop. But this actually does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And so it's like, you know, the first time you brought it out to me, I looked at it, I smelled it. I was like, this is wild. I immediately, of course, you know, the first phase was seeing the product. And of course, then I got into the legal due diligence, but I took that, I rolled it up, I went with Eric, and I smoked it outside of this. I think it was like a big cannabis, a convention event that we were at in Detroit. And I was like, this smokes. It was, I mean, the terps were phenomenal. It was, it might've been, it was some type of
the old school lemons.
Yeah. That's what it was. Yeah. And man, I was blown away. And after that, I talked to you more, and I was like, Eric came out to Chicago, and I mean, we're here in LA now. And so, like, you know, we just kept pushing on it, and, you know, started really putting in the things that I knew we needed to be successful. And so frankly, it's like, I see so many different businesses out there, so many different people who are trying to break into this space. And one of the biggest challenges I often see, particularly from a flower standpoint, is that everybody, has got the best genetics. Everybody grows the best weed. Everybody thinks their brand is the coolest. But more often than not, very few can actually attain that. And when I started looking at space weed, I was like, this is an entirely different product category. This is something that is actually new. And I think in order to really compete and survive in cannabis today, you've got to be thinking about a way to create your own category. And it's very difficult to do, particularly in flower, but that's what happened here.
Yeah, particularly in flower too. And you're right. I mean, creating that blue ocean, right? That unique offering that really no one else is doing. You talk to anybody that really knows the game and you're like, I'm going to take this flower, like right now, I'm going to take this flower brand and pop it off. It's just like, but do all this standard stuff. It's like anybody that really knows, like that's like I'm banging my head against the wall, because it's like, yeah, you could have sheer force and just, effectively build the brand up, but that takes years and years and years, first of all. And there's still gonna be people that are working just as hard as you, that has just the same amount of genetics, that has just the same amount of, it's high, like any sort of innovative product, like you said, like a new SKU, that's where there's like long-term a lot of value. But it's crazy though, because to do that in the flower space is definitely going to be tough, and we're still, we still got a long way to go. So I'm very excited about this. And then also too, and a big shouts out to Eric, because like I said, Eric, once you saw the fundamentals of everything, like no debt, no all that stuff, and like, proprietary technology, like proof of concept, competing in like one of the hardest markets, if not the hardest market in the entire country. I mean, it's ripe. It is ripe for us to take this to the next level.
Yeah, and I think even like as I'm looking at you, and you grab that right there, right? The pills that Eric also created. It's the flower, right? But there's more than just that, right? It's the pills, right? It's the capsules, I mean, right? Which, from somebody who is, I'm pretty health focused. I love to work out. I'm about clean eating, all of those things. Being able to use capsules like those. I remember the first time Eric gave them to me, and then I gave them to my wife, and she fell in love with them. We both did. Just such like a super clear-headed high. It's only flower in there, right? You can actually see it. And I think that like that's another thing that really impressed me and excited me about this and speaking with Eric, is that he's very focused on using a singular input that's clean, that we can understand what it is, whether it be in this form factor right here in the form of capsules, or the pre-rolls as well. But it is in my mind a little bit more like focused on kind of like general well-being. And that's like the root of plant medicine. Mm-hmm. That's really where it should all stem from. And so seeing someone who's not just an innovator, but who's doing it from a place of wanting to see this plant help people in a healthy way, that's something I can definitely get behind, because I would never want to work with a product that I didn't back, and I have to feel strongly about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you hit it on the head. I think, it's kind of made me click in my head actually recently, even though I've kind of known this, like, me and Eric have had conversations for years at this point, but like, he's always like, oh, like, I want to focus, like what you said, you want to focus on wellness and flower. And in my head, I'm thinking, my mind in that, like, sometimes when I'm listening, in the past when I was listening to that, I was like, dude, no, I want to like, no, we got to have like oil, we got to have dope. Like, it's all about the brand, it's my branding mind. Right. But, he's right though. Like this is future weed. This is future weed that is built off of the fundamentals of what God, like why this plant is so powerful is the actual flower. Once you start to distort it into other ways, there's a whole host of different problems that can come about. Like the meeting I was just in earlier, we were talking about it. Like, I think the culture, I think the people that really care about weed, I think that they're always going to be within that flower sector. Now, obviously, shout out to the hash makers, the oil. Like, I love that stuff too. But man, there's nothing better than just like just some good old flower. And I think that as time goes on and we get more advanced with everything, we got like super dabs or whatever, you know what I'm saying? This is something that has been created for the future, but still is grounded in the past. And I love that. The texture is something that is interesting. When I talk to people about, when I describe it to people, they always go, oh, does it turn to dust? No, it doesn't turn into dust at all. It turns into something that you may have not really, seen really that much, right? You haven't seen it in this form. Whereas like, yeah, I mean the texture, like, tell me about the texture.
Okay. So, I mean, even as we talk about like texture, and I'm going to start with just looking at size too, in terms of just the overall look. We've discussed before, it's greener. You're getting more flower, right? Because of the way in which you're actually, flash freezing this, and it's looking true to what you would kind of pull off of a plant. But I have found, what you said earlier, right? That, people are like, oh, does it turn into powder? Does it not break down the right way? And I have actually found, and I learned this in using it, was that you don't need a grinder at all. In fact, you don't really want to grind this. Instead, you break it down by hand. It comes out fluffy, right? It's not a bunch of powder. You roll it up. It makes for an easier rolling experience. And honestly, you can be much quicker in terms of just throwing a joint together. And I think for those who, have had an experience of it just turning into powder, it's more than likely because whatever they tried wasn't put through the right process.
Yeah. Or being too sticky, right?
Yeah.
Like way too, that's another thing too.
Absolutely.
And the stickiness more so is the moisture content, not the resin content.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think, again, there are some people out there who have tried to replicate this, but they've done so unsuccessfully. And as a result of that, there are some people who have had a negative experience in trying to break down and roll up product that has gone through, sublimation. But in this case, that's why I believe in this so much, is because, we have figured out the right way. Eric has figured out the right way. And so, for us now, the next step is just to go out and educate and show people what we have, right? What we're working with, because whatever they might have used or consumed in the past, it's different. It's not the same.
It's not the same. Space weed is a whole different skew of itself on top of it. but it really, I mean, it's the processes, we're perfecting them, all that.
Like even from a weight comparison standpoint, kind of see what we have right here. These are both 7 grams, but I mean, there's a noticeable difference in the amount of product that you have. And, again, going back, at the end of the day, I always like to say, I am a consumer. I love this plant. And so, if I go out and, this is what I've got in my jar, or I get this right here from a consumer experience standpoint, it's a Christmas tree, right? It's like a giant floret of broccoli. This thing is absolutely beautiful. And so, you've got that really easily identifiable difference just from a visual inspection on the weight alone. And at the end of the day, who doesn't want more product, right? And I think that, like, if you're able, and we are, to achieve such a large amount of product differentiation, right? We've talked about, right, everything from how this benefits people on the growing side, how this helps consumers as far as having something that's more a little health focused, smoother, but then even down to, like, looking at COAs when we actually test the product, because you don't have that same loss, right? You're having this exchange of organic volatile compounds that are getting released during a traditional hang dry. And during the sublimation process, we're not losing the terpenes, right, in the same manner. And so you can, the proof is in the testing, right? And I think that, we've seen time over time that the cannabinoid preservation, the terpene preservation is higher from space weed.
Yeah. And this made me click in my head. Let me ask you this. Why was it that humans started drying cannabis, like hang drying it? Why? What was the reasoning, you think?
That's a good question. I would imagine in part it was
too wet.
Yeah.
It's too wet. It's not smokable.
Yeah.
Right? So nature intended us, because it's too wet, it forced people to wait and hang dry it. This process, it allows for nature, to really be consumed how it should have been, because what held it back was the moisture content slowly getting released. That's why we, like, this whole idea of, like, this is what, like, the traditional hang dry is funny. It's like, no, that was out of necessity, because if you think about it, I mean, there's arguments, I guess you'd say, with, like, fruit, you want to make it ripen or whatever, but even then, I think it's more so just people, like, getting to try it off the branch that, nature intended, I guess, more so. But it's interesting you think about, why do people hang dry? Like, what's even the reason, like, the origins of it? I mean, real quick, I'll just say, like, me personally, I like to consume space weed pretty much how I typically consume flower in general. I love to roll it up. I've been lately loving putting it into, vaporizers or, with Hue, I'll be smoking a lot more bong. Really in everything just because it's so smooth. I mean, I remember years back when I first smoked space weed, my ex-girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time, we smoked it, for a month straight. And when we ran out, it was noticeable. Like all my friends were like, damn, where's the space weed at? And it's that smoothness is just, I love it. So the ways I like to smoke though, a lot of different ways, but no matter what, space weed.
Yeah.
Maybe not in a blunt, actually. Maybe that's something I don't know.
I think I would say I'm identical to you. Really, like, again, it is for me, rolling a joint it feels very ritualistic. And so, and in part, it's also like, it's my inspection process, right? I like to look at my flower. I like to feel it. I like to break it down. And so I really enjoy rolling it up, but I will say, as of lately, the close eye has been coming to vaporizing it. Just because, it's, as I've gotten older and has been smoking as long as I've been smoking, I definitely, think a little bit more about what I'm consuming and, whether or not, do I want my lungs to go through this experience? And so as a result, I've just become a lot more picky over the years, both about how I consume and what I consume. And finding a product like Space Weed that actually fills that void in the most perfect way, where it's like, wait a minute, it's incredibly tasty. It smokes very smooth. It's able to be vaporized, and I'm able to have a consumption experience. It's going to be a little bit more health focused for myself. That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are looking for that too. I think it's a good point though too. The older I get too, man, no more PGR Bubba packs. Like, I'm trying to smoke that top shelf, clean, healthy space weed.